Cliff Greenfield has served as the manager of the Pembina Valley Watershed District since 1997 and has experience working on many natural resources and project programs. Today, Cliff will showcase activities going on in the Pembina and Plum River watersheds and how to collaborate with partnerships, even order and further the pursuit of healthier watersheds. So welcome, Cliff. And I believe that Jody is going to be the moderator for this session. So there she is.
Yeah, if you'll excuse me, I'll take my mask off. It's not so much the breathing, it's the glasses and fogging up and not being able to see. But yeah, everybody should be safe. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you. We're going to talk about some of the recent things that have happened at Pembina Valley, and there's lots going on. And we're going to focus on partnerships and collaborations because we feel we're a little bit lacking in capacity. We've got some great boots on the ground. We've got board members feeling the pulse, working with farms, from farms. But we need those collaborations and partnerships to really get the job done. There's one client, there's only one payer. And just to help me make that point, I'm inviting Derek Cornelison. He's a consultant that works with Indigenous communities, and he's working with us and Swan Lake First Nation on some projects that are bringing us together. Again, thanks to the legislation change that enables us to work closely with our First Nation partners. So I think being a good partner takes a certain attitude. I'm not sure if our Vice Chairman, Bob Giesbrecht, is here. But if you sit down and talk with him, he'll always say at some point, it's not all about you. And I think that's the attitude you need to have. What does your client need? What do you need to do to be a partner to satisfy what needs to be done? So we've got a lot of partners listed here, a lot of logos. There's no greater sin than not recognize a partner, so I'm going to flip through that really quickly so you don't see your logo isn't on there. This map basically shows all about, at a glance, what's happening with Pembina Valley, where we've kind of gone recently. The big circle on the left is showing up, good. Yellow circle there, that was the boundary realignment. So now Pembina Valley has the entire Canadian portion of the Pembina River. That brought on some partners from the west. The middle circle is basically looking at municipalities that have gone elsewhere. Really haven't gone anywhere, they're still there, we still talk to them. I talk to the different managers and different board members from our neighbors all the time on a regular basis. So it's not really a separation, it's just a little bit of a change. In fact, this year we're working with Neil on a project, a big fencing and watering project where the guy's got a section of land, it's half in his watershed and half in ours, so we're working together, and that's pretty common. In that central circle as well, we've got a strengthened partnership with Swan Lake First Nation, and then also with the federal government in the Eastern Prairie Living Lab project. And that's something that's in its last year, and I understand the next version of it is going to be more inclusive. This first round, a 4-year period, involved 4 watershed districts where Canadian scientists are working with farmers and trying to solve the problems that the farmers have. Circle there, the green circle on the right, is our expansion. We've been looking forward to this for a long time, and the province has announced that April 1st, hopefully, all our ducks in a row, we'll have partners to the east. Area water kind of flows to the east, and the municipalities are connected that way. So come April 1st, we'll be going from Boisevane to the Red River. Probably be calling Jody once every 2 weeks then, because we're in her territory, that flatter Red River Valley up against the Red Lake type thing. As well, coincidentally, I guess we're doing an integrated watershed management plan for that chunk. That's maybe one of the few pieces left in Manitoba where the province hasn't invested and worked with watershed districts and developed a watershed plan for that. Also the Pembina River. So we're the Pembina Plum. Pembina River watershed plan was done in 2011. Looking to refresh with that. We've had some discussion with Andrea and as well with Kevin Tenake from Nature Conservancy. We're looking at possibly combining those processes. You know NCC, they're very good at focusing and also when they identify an issue, they can bring funding to address it. So we're hoping those two circles will align. We've had great leadership over the years. We've only had 3 chairmen in 32 years. One of our board members, I think, is a provincial appointee, and this speaks volumes about the trust the province has in you people in watershed districts. Of our 40 board members, the one provincial appointee is the most local grassroots guy of the whole bunch. And here he is teaching kids at a water festival about how beavers interact with their landscape. Again, 38, 40 pairs of boots on the ground. That's the strength of the organization and the process, and that's why people want to partner with us. We have that connection. We wanted to especially honor our previous chairman, Murray Seymour, and his wife, Susan. They were the Ma Builder Award winner last year, but it was hard to really recognize them, so hopefully they're here today and you can search them out and buy them a beer. But we've got great staff at Pembina Valley. And when I talk about the leadership, there's that trickle-down effect that the strength of the leadership trickles down through the organization, so everybody feels like they're heard, they're part of the solution. So we've got great admin people, Lexine and Angie, our engineering staff, Randy and Jarrett. Randy's run our construction program for 24 years. Great resource if you have questions about water projects. Our newest member, Clint Cavers, I saw he was here somewhere today. He's a cider guy, not a beer guy, so if you do run into him, he's a grow coordinator, and he's really running with it, really doing a good job, speaks the language, and he's even started a grow coordinator self-help group every second Friday. You can come in. I'm not sure if they have 12 steps or not, but he just took that in on his own to do that, so kudos to Clint. Summer students, that's the real workforce of the district during the summer. We try to provide employment and hopefully encourage young people to get involved and consider an environmental career. Conservation Farm Family Award winners were Wayne and Maria McDonald from the Cartwright area, Holistic Resource Management. People, if you know anything about that, you don't need to say more. And this is one of the projects I wanted to highlight was the Killarney Treatment Wetland Project. So Killarney came to us and said, look, we want you to help us build a big hole in the ground so that we can store our runoff, about half the town's runoff. We go through this area, and we said, well, what do we consider a treatment wetland? We use a naturalized wetland, constructed wetland, to do more than what just a water retention project would do. So we got funding from Lake Winnipeg Basin Program. We got some help from designers, Chris Penner, who is a wetland ecologist. He's got his own shingle, but he used to work for NPS. And David Scott, he's a gentleman from Swan Lake First Nation that teaches a lot of us about traditional knowledge and how they view wetlands, the plants they like, that type of thing. So we combined this into a project, and I've got a few slides. This is where the water used to go, just sat in a field and then left town. And now the earthwork is done. We're waiting for to be a little bit more like this kind of weather so we can plant cattails and other vegetation. And this is the outfall. So this we stole this design from Ducks Unlimited. It's kind of a stop log gate. You can control water levels, which is important for marshes. And my last slide here, I think, is a pretty motley looking crew. This is a project on a project that we built 25 years ago, the McCoy Pond. A local group, Mound Game and Fish, is using it herring pond for walleye. And they've got help from Manitoba Fisheries, of course, the arm of Louise, some landowners, and the Mound Game and Fish guys do a tremendous amount of work. They do some netting in this pond, and they've done it for 4 years now, and they got remarkable records this year much because of the drought. In the spring, there's only 2 feet of water in this dam. They put in 50,000 walleye fry, and in the fall, they pulled out over 17,000 fingerlings, and those went to all local lakes to improve the fishery in those lakes. So this was a tremendous amount of work by these gentlemen and ladies, and our hats off to them. So one of the projects I talked about was the work with Swan Lake. It's really exciting and interesting to work with that community. And to help explain that story, he's going to do a better job than I, is Derek Cornelison. So welcome him, please.
All right, so hi everyone. Sure we got this thing right. So first of all, thanks a lot to National Association of Watershed and Pembina Valley for creating this space. For Swan Lake to kind of showcase what Swan Lake is doing and the collaborations with Pembina Valley. There's other collaborations with Central Assiniboine Watershed District and Red Boyne as well. This one's just kind of focusing on what's happening with Pembina Valley. But I kind of got looped in to work with Swan Lake a couple of years ago. There's Elder Dave Scott, who's in one of the photos, or one or two of them maybe. He's pretty involved. Mentioned to me that the Watershed District Act was coming down the pipe. And Swan Lake, and part of what that did, we all know it changed boundaries, but it enabled watershed districts to develop partnerships and work with First Nations as well. So Dave was saying to me, we got to get ahead of that and make sure Swan Lake is at the table. And we already have good relationships with the watersheds. Let's build on that, build capacity at Swan Lake. So I got to meet Eric Cameron over there, lands manager at Swan Lake. And we got to work, and we couldn't really have gotten anywhere without the cooperation and the collaboration with Pembina Valley as well, and the support from the lands office over at Swan Lake. Just it's been a lot of really good work. So also want to say I'm just honored to stand here and speak about Swan Lake. It's been a good 2 years working with you folks, and didn't expect I'd be standing up talking about Swan Lake, so it's an honor. What I wanted to mention there is that once we kind of got together and decided what to do about this new act coming down the pipe, I know that Swan Lake had worked with the province on the need for that act, so shout out to the province on that work. And the key thing we wanted to do was set up what we call the Swan Lake Watershed Stewardship Forum. And that started off with Swan Lake First Nation and the lands managers of Pembina Valley, Red Boyne, and Central Assiniboine. Now we've expanded to include Living Labs folks in that group and Natural Conservancy of Canada. And we also have the province that's also attending our meetings and giving us insights into their legislative processes. So it's been very, very helpful. And the province actually has kicked in and given us a little bit of support. It's a little bit extra funding for this work too. So another shout out. But what I want to do here is just kind of quickly run through a few of the projects that we've been working on the Valley Watershed District. There's more that goes on in the other watershed districts too, and Living Labs is doing a fair amount of work with Swan Lake. There'll be a good presentation on that tomorrow where Eric will have a little more spotlight. He loves it. So that's tomorrow with the Living Labs presentation. But so we got 3 kind of site projects, the Summer Youth Program and an MOU that I want to talk about. Just very briefly, I'll run through them. So the Indian Springs Dam, that was one that initially wasn't, well, it was on the radar, but it wasn't one of the projects that we were initially working on. We started off with a product from Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Lake Winnipeg Basin Program. So that dam itself was something that was, it was an old dam that had been built several decades ago, and it was starting to fail. And we weren't really sure what to do about it. Some thoughts about, well, lowering the levels, creating a better habitat in that area, but just making sure that that dam itself was taken care of, and that we didn't have some sort of catastrophic failure of it at some point. Towards the bottom of that picture, you can see that's actually Swan Lake right there. Right of that picture, you can see that circle is the powwow grounds. So that's right in the heart of Swan Lake territory there. And these are just a couple of photos of what that dam looks like after the work, actually. So I don't have a before photo for you, but yeah, before you never would have been driving your trucks over it that way and having a group parked on it, looking at it. But we did manage to lower the levels. They're still monitoring. So, you know, the beavers are, there's a drainage down right where those trucks are. Beavers love to build their dams around that area. So how to work with those beavers and make sure that dam is maintained and the water levels are maintained. The folks there in that photo on the bottom right in that site visit is we're looking at seeing what kind of vegetation to there. And that's another thing that's part of this work with Swan Lake is how do you make sure Indigenous knowledge is kind of leading the way in a lot of these projects. So part of our discussions, our site visits are what's traditional medicines, for example, would be important to Swan Lake there. How do we ensure that we have not just for the medicines, but also for the Um, Another one is the erosion site. So you can still see the dam location in the upper right, and on the other side, sort of down towards the left, there's a couple of spots. And those are more like ground springs, it seems. We're still spending some time taking a look at what's going on there, but there's, in both of those sites, there's erosion that seems like it's coming in from underground. So the left-hand side, those are both the different sites there. So we're taking a look at them. They're advancing pretty quickly. There's sedimentation and loading into Swan Lake itself from these things, and also safety from the farmers that are running their equipment nearby. But we're still in discussions as to what to do, but we've had some good engineering proposals, and that's been in collaboration with Pembina Valley in the province. But we also have traditional knowledge to take into account. And so, part of our discussions is we've had elders tell us that, you're witnessing the creation of a new valley. Why would you want to change it, right? So we have to balance that with, well, there's also sedimentation and nutrient loading issues. What will our solution be? And Living Labs folks have been part of that conversation at times, discussing what a more natural solution to that might be. So it's been really good to see those conversations growing with this group. So that's something that we put on the back burner actually to get go and deal with that the dam, because that was more of an urgent issue. So this is something we're still discussing. And there's a blonde water retention site that's further up north on that top bar, and the other photo is a little bit more of a closer up shot. And what's interesting about that is that's actually not specifically in Swan Lake territory. The reserve is just south of that Mauro that's cutting across to east-west. But that's water flowing into Swan Lake. And this is where part of our forum's responsibilities and initiatives there are to understand how do Indigenous rights figure into these watershed management planning and the projects that we're working on. So recognizing that that's water flowing into Swan Lake Reserve, so that becomes a Section 35 consultation issue. And those don't have to be scary words. We've had Pembina Valley that's taking a lead in like jumping on it and saying, well, we want to get ahead of these things too, make sure we're doing consultation early so we don't run into trouble down the road. So it's been a really good experience so far. Environment and Climate Change Canada, Lake Winnipeg Basin Program was flexible enough to allow us to move our funding from an initial project, being those gully erosions, over to something like that. So, having funders that are flexible in that regard is really very helpful too. And one other thing that we've been able to do with Pembina Valley and the other watershed districts, Living Labs, Nature Conservancy Canada, all collaborating on this the summer youth program. And Dave wasn't able to be here today, but he was really instrumental in getting that going. There's a quote up there from him. But this has been a really big piece. We've been trying to get that off the ground for years. First Nation ADAP program from CERNAC is a piece of funding that we had to be able to put this one on. And the funding came real quick, and we had to kind of get it off the ground real quick. But it worked, and it was a 6-week program. Really great. We have bigger presentations on that program. But this is just to let you know that it happened. We're doing it again next year. What we really want to do is involve non-Indigenous youth as well as Indigenous youth from the community. So next year, we're hoping to kind of get ahead of it a bit sooner and put the word out and get a little more interest from youth for that program. And finally, I just want to touch on this MOU, which is kind of a big deal. Yeah, I noticed that I didn't quite create that slide properly, so my apologies. A little bit of it is cut off, but it's a collaboration with Swan Lake and the 3 watershed districts that I mentioned. The photo there is just about a month ago we finally signed this thing. It took about 2 years, in the making. And especially in times of COVID and wanting to have community meetings about it, it was kind of tough to keep things rolling, but we did. And so thanks a lot to the province for helping out with that work too, and with the watershed districts and being so supportive. The big thing about that MOU is, building Swan Lake capacity to take the lead on watershed management for their territories. And so holding regular meetings, diving into some what might be difficult conversations about what do Indigenous rights mean in this thing, in these contexts, how does Indigenous knowledge lead and help us understand things like watershed management planning. And one of the things that this watershed districts stewardship forum is working on too, we'll be working together to develop an integrated watershed management plan from Swan Lake's perspective that can then feed into the broader watershed management plans for the watershed district. So those are just a few things that we're working on. It's been a pretty eventful couple of years, and just a big shout out to all of the different sponsors and collaborators that have helped out with this kind of work. Looking forward to how things develop in the future. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Cliff and Derek. That's really great to see everything that you guys are doing with Swan Lake First Nation. Very encouraging. And we don't have too much time for questions, but do we have 1 or 2 questions in the audience that you'd like to ask today? And maybe if I can get the students to grab the microphones, if you want, we'll run up to you with the microphones. You don't have to get up at all. But if not, that's okay too. I'll give you 2 minutes. I have a lot of questions for Cliff that I will be asking later, and Derek. So they will be available at the exhibit hall all week till Wednesday, or I guess Tuesday night.